Good morning everyone, welcome to the forest. Today's video I wanted to talk about the first roll of film that I've developed and shot in something like 16 years. I think the last time I shot any film was about 2005 when I was shooting, come on Stefan, we're out with Stefan this morning, when I was shooting on my old Canon EOS 5, and the camera that I was using is this one here. This is an Olympus Trip 35. My mother's old Olympus Trip 35, and it's quite a funky little camera. It's a point and shoot with a little bit of automation and a little bit of manual control. It's actually pretty awesome. I think it came with us. I have vague memories of a trip to the south coast, to the southwest of England as a child. I was maybe like 4 or 5 years old. Western-super-Mare, if you know it. And I think I have vague memories of the camera coming with us. And then as technology changed, and I don't know, my mother never really took that many photos, I think it just ended up in storage. And pretty much since the end of the 1980s, this camera has been living in my parents' attic, along with a load of my stuff, which has been accumulating in my parents' attic because I've moved countries a number of times, and my parents very generously gave me their attic space to store all of the stuff that I wasn't taking with me. Stefan, let's go. Come on. It's funny, I first wondered if the Olympus Trip would be worth anything, and of course it's not. They must have made millions of these things back in the day, and I really like it. It's a compact point and shoot with a little bit of manual control, so you can set the aperture, but there's no light meter. So it's going to set the shutter speed for you, and I think it's a choice between 1/40th and 1/200th of a second. Well, you don't get to choose, the camera gets to choose. And you have to focus as well. And focusing is a bit funny because it's just this series of symbols on the side of the barrel of the lens. And it's you know, very close, not quite so close, a bit further away and really quite far away, as indicated by some symbols that are people and some mountains. So it's a bit of guesswork. You know, you've got to figure out how far you are away from your subject in the hope that it will be in focus. So I bought myself some Fomapan 400, the logic being that I didn't want to spend a lot on film in case the camera didn't work, and also it being winter and wanting to shoot a little bit indoors every now and then, I thought 400 ISO would be a good starting point. So I pulled it out of my parents' attic on a trip to the UK. I was finally over there with an empty car this time to clear out some stuff, and I laid claim to my mother's old Olympus Trip, and I'm really glad I did. It's such a fun little camera to use. I think the styling on it looks great. It's classic 1980s, this mixture of plastic and metal, and they're solidly built as well, I think, and the lens is pretty good. It's been a really fun camera to use while I was in the UK, and then bringing it back home to France to take into the forest and out on foggy mornings. And somehow I've not managed to massively underexpose a single frame, which is bizarre given that I wasn't really paying too much attention, and overriding the automatic aperture sometimes to f2.8 just to force it to be able to take a photograph, otherwise it says nope, too dark. And yeah, I mean, the cheap scans on cheap film, the quality's not great, but and you know, a few of the exposures have pushed that scanning process quite hard, but still got usable images. There's been a lot been said about how shooting on film is different from shooting on digital. You know, so you don't have this kind of carefree instantaneity that you have with digital, and it just makes you a bit more thoughtful about your images. You know, every frame is costing you money and time, and obviously you might have only a limited amount of film in your pocket as well. And there's something nice about knowing that what you're capturing is going to have, you know, a physical form. It's going to be trapped on this tiny slip of plastic and should last a pretty long time. And that changes your attitude to how you shoot, or at least changes my attitude to how I shoot. And yeah, getting this roll of film back was really kind of quite emotional, just because, you know, you invest a lot of meaning into the process, and in addition to that, the subject that I was shooting had a lot of meaning to me, And for example, this image, which isn't a very exciting image, it's just an underexposed shot of some sheep in a film, and that grainy thing on the horizon is actually the sea. But for me, I just walked half a mile to meet a taxi to try and avoid some traffic, and I was on my way to a funeral of a very close friend of mine who died recently, out of the blue. And yeah, just having that moment on film makes a difference. I feel something from that image, and it's a shot that I probably wouldn't have taken on my phone if I just got my phone in my pocket, or if I had taken it on my phone, I might not have ever looked at it for a long time, if ever. You just kind of have this massive collection of phone photos that you barely ever look at anymore, whereas having it on film, so the thought process that led to it, and the fact that it's my mother's camera and all the rest, just makes me feel that moment a little bit more intensely, I guess. And I was waiting really impatiently for the scans to come back from the lab, and the first shot on the film was an out of focus photograph of my father, and the second one was this frame where I'd actually managed to get the focusing right. To anyone else it's not a very exciting photograph, but when I picture my father, this is what I picture of him in his chair with his book, sipping a cup of tea. The only things that are missing are his mandolin or the cat, actually. And I don't know if you're like me, but the global pandemic, we count our blessings, and we've not been too greatly affected by it, which is remarkable. But it has been quite a challenging time, obviously, for the vast majority of us. And if you're anything like me, you'd have had just periods where you think about darker things that you wouldn't normally think about. And the Olympus Trip was an excuse to take a photograph of my father that I wouldn't ordinarily have shot. I couldn't say to him, "Hey Dad, sit there while I take this photo," because the pandemic is making me increasingly aware that this isn't going to be forever. So it got me to thinking, they say gear doesn't make the photographer, and there's a degree of truth of that, but I probably wouldn't have taken this photograph had I not wanted to play with this film camera for the first time in however long. Thank you for coming on the walk with me this morning. We're about halfway through. Merry Christmas. See you next time.